All right, let's talk about the digital world we all live in. It's absolutely massive, built on countless networks and systems. But have you ever stopped to wonder how we actually know if any of it is secure? I mean, really secure. It's one thing to build digital walls, but you also need someone to come along and check for cracks. And that, right there, is what a network and system security audit is all about.
And look, it really boils down to a simple idea, summed up perfectly here by Professor Simon Maya Karume. An audit isn't about building the defenses, it's about evaluating them. The whole point is to figure out if the security measures you've got in place are, well, if they're actually effective. Are they really doing the job they're supposed to be doing? Let's make it even simpler. Think of it like this. You've got your security team, right? They're the architects and the construction crew. They're the ones building that digital fortress. But then you've got the auditors. They're the inspectors who show up after the fact. They tap on the walls. They jiggle the locks, and they make sure that fortress can actually survive a real attack. One team builds it, the other one proves it's strong.
So here's our game plan for this health check. First, we're going to look at the digital threat landscape. What are we even up against? Then, we'll explore how you build the digital fortress to defend against those threats. After that, we'll open up the auditor's toolkit to see how they actually test those defenses. And finally, we'll see how all of this gets you from a simple audit to genuine, rock-solid assurance.
Okay, let's dive right in. You gotta start with the why, right? Why do we even need to go through all this trouble? Well, because the digital world is full of dangers, and believe me, they come in all shapes and sizes. So, threat number one, the obvious bad guys. These are your external attackers using things like malware, viruses, worms, and the big one, ransomware. That's the nasty stuff that can sneak in from the outside and lock up an entire company's data until they pay up.
But here's the thing. The call isn't always coming from outside the house. You've got insider threats. These are people who are supposed to be there, employees, contractors, who misuse the access they already have. And this can be accidental or totally malicious. What makes these so tricky is that the person already has the keys. Their activity can look completely normal from the outside.
And then you get the really sneaky stuff, active network attacks. Think of sniffing, where a hacker is basically eavesdropping on your network's conversations, listening to everything that goes by. Or spoofing, where they put on a digital disguise and pretend to be a computer or person you trust. These attacks go after the very rules of how our networks are supposed to work.
All right, so that's the scary stuff. How do we fight back? Well, organizations build this multi-layered digital fortress, and the auditor's whole job is to come in and inspect every single one of those layers, from the foundation all the way to the roof.
Your very first line of defense is the basic infrastructure. Firewalls are like the bouncers at the door, deciding who gets in and who gets kicked out. Then there's network segmentation, which is brilliant. It's like creating watertight compartments on a ship. If one part gets breached, the damage doesn't spread. A DMZ is kind of like a secure front lobby for your public-facing stuff, like a website. And access control lists, that's the super detailed rulebook that dictates exactly who is allowed to go where.
Okay, that's the perimeter. But what about all the individual computers and servers inside the walls? They each need to be secured, and that process is called hardening. It's a pretty straightforward but absolutely critical process. First, you turn off any service you don't actually need. Less stuff running means fewer ways for attackers to get in. Second, you constantly apply security patches to plug up any known holes. And third, you enforce super strong access controls, like multi-factor authentication.
Of course, strong walls are great, but you also need an alarm system. In the digital world, a SIM is like the central security monitoring desk, pulling in alerts from everywhere. An intrusion detection system, or IDS, is like a motion detector. It sees something suspicious and screams, "Hey, something's wrong." But then you have its tougher cousin, the intrusion prevention system, or IPS. It doesn't just scream. It actually steps in and blocks the threat on the spot.
Now let's be real, a lot of our stuff isn't in our own building anymore. It's in the cloud. So who's responsible for security then? That's where this crucial concept, the shared responsibility model, comes in. Think of it like renting an apartment. The cloud provider, the landlord, is responsible for the security of the building. But you, the customer, are still responsible for locking the door to your apartment. An auditor will look at that dividing line very, very closely.
Okay, threats, check. Defenses, check. Now for the really cool part. How does an auditor actually kick the tires on all this? How do they know if it really works? Well, let's pop the hood and take a look inside their toolkit.
So auditors have a few key moves in their playbook. First is inspection. This is like them looking at the original blueprints. They'll review system settings and firewall rules to see if they're configured correctly. Then there's log correlation, which is basically digital forensics. They piece together clues from all these different system logs to see what actually happened during an event. And finally, you have reperformance. This is where the auditor says, don't just tell me it works, show me. They'll run their own vulnerability scan to see if they find the same things the security team did.
So finding a few issues here and there is one thing. But how do you grade the whole program? How do you measure the overall health of an organization's security? You can't just say, it's kind of good. You need a real benchmark to measure against. And that's where these big, established frameworks come in. Think of them as globally recognized rulebooks for what good looks like. A company might use ISO 27001 if they want a super comprehensive, top-to-bottom system. Or they might lean on the NIST framework if their main goal is managing risk. Or maybe they'll use COBIT to make sure their security spending actually lines up with their business goals. An auditor uses these to turn their findings from an opinion into an objective fact.
And when you boil it all down, every single control, every test, every framework, it's all in service of protecting three fundamental principles. It's known as the CIA triad. Confidentiality is about keeping secret secret. Integrity is about making sure your data is accurate and hasn't been tampered with. And availability means making sure the system is actually up and running when you need it. This is the bedrock of all information security.
At the end of the day, an audit gives a company real confidence, real assurance in their digital fortress. But it does leave you with a final thought, doesn't it? We all have our own little digital lives, our own data, our own defenses on our phones and laptops. So when was the last time you audited your own walls?